It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That, of course, is Alan Saunders. Alan, how we doing?
I'm feisty today, Smitty.
Ooh, feisty. I don't know that word gets thrown around enough, to be quite honest with you. But I like it. We'll get into why I think that you are using that word here in a little bit later in the episode. But I don't want to start right there. I know that's going to be the meat and potatoes of this episode already, just from our discussion before we press that record button. So I don't want to get there right away. We're going to have to wait for the feistiness to come out, Alan. Let's start with some updates coming out of Tomlin Tuesday here. Big question surrounding this. When are these reinforcements going to get back into the fold? When are we going to see DeShon Elliott return? When are we going to see Joey Porter Jr. return? Already Alex Highsmith rolled out by Mike Tomlin. But do you think that there's a shot for either of those first two to get back for this one?
Yeah, I feel like there's a decent chance for DeShon Elliott here. That would be – he was injured in the Jets game. This would be at the very sort of front edge of the timeline for his return. But I think there's a chance. Porter, man, I like hamstrings. And then the way this injury was sort of initially thought to be minor, but then seems like it has become more serious. I always feel like when that happens, they're going to be really cautious coming back. You know, like you have a soft tissue injury that either they sort of I don't want to say misdiagnosed because that's the wrong word, but maybe missed the significance of it first, or some kind of re-injury or aggravation to. I always feel like at that point, it's like, just wait, don't push it. Like, you're just going to make it worse if you try to get on the leading edge of the recovery curve at that point. But I do think
it's pretty easy to say with a bye the following week as well.
Right, especially. Yeah. I think Elliott, there's a better chance he could play. With the sort of, I mean, you can't play safety if you can't turn and run. That is the one sort of like, it's not like Harmon where you can kind of put him in there and see how it goes. He does have to be able to prove that he can do it all before he can get out there. The other part about Porter I wanted to add too is like they're going to have 2 days of practice in Pittsburgh, and then you know what I want to do when my hammy's acting up? Sit in a plane for 7 hours. That'll make it better, I'm sure. Like that's exactly what every ailing hamstring needs. Is 7 hours stuffed in a tube after you've practiced already that day, and then don't sleep, wake up the next day and practice again. Like how I can't even fathom Joey Porter Jr. playing this week. I think DeShon Elliott has a chance.
Yeah, in regards to Joey, it is interesting just because like coming out of that, he was like, yeah, it's just tight. Like it was kind of put out there, like it wasn't necessarily
precautionary that he sat out the rest of the game, that he felt like he could have come back in. So I don't know if something else happened, if he tried to go and hurt it again, or maybe, you know, just woke up the next morning and said, this actually hurts a lot more than we thought.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've kind of felt the same way. Not necessarily that I'm like, yeah, DeShon Elliott's for sure going to be back, but I was kind of putting Porter into that like almost outside of questionable for the same reasons that you brought up. Obviously soft tissue bye on the other side of this. It just, I think, makes too much sense to give him another week. But obviously mentioned Ireland, a lot of Ireland stuff coming out of Tomlin Tuesday as well. And wanted to discuss that, not only because, funny enough, took a ricochet shot at Anthony Richardson, and we can discuss that in a second, but also just in general, I thought it was cool to bring up Dan Rooney being on their mind and everything like that as they go embark on this game. But what else did he have to say just as it relates to Ireland itself?
Yeah, let's talk about the travel, actually. Well, that's a good segue here from the injury conversation. Mike Tomlin said, this is very different for him than the last time they went, because if you remember, the Steelers were I mean, not the first, certainly, but there had not been a lot of international games played before the Steelers went to London to play the Vikings in, what was that, 2013. There were, I think, a half a dozen games played in London before that one. And there had been games, college games and things like that. But like the thing about the NFL is these teams are competitive with their information. So if you're the seventh game, and I do think that some of those teams had gone twice. I think only like a dozen teams had gone to Europe before the Steelers went in 2013. If your staff learns stuff, figures things out about the process that you think is going to help you get better at it the next time around, you don't share that information. Like you keep that to yourself. All your best practices that you learn, you want to keep for yourself. But now after a decade and a half, 2 decades almost, and not only have more teams cycled through, but now those coaching staffs have been washed through the league over and over and over again. And we're having more college football games played over there. It's not so much of a mystery anymore. I think teams have figured it out to a greater extent, the science behind what to do about how to schedule your travel. The other thing that has happened in here is that the NFL, especially with these games in new areas, like this, the first regular season game in Ireland, the NFL is dictating the travel schedule for these teams. They're not giving them the opportunity to decide when they want to go, because the NFL is the one that are setting up the everything, the hotel, the practice facilities, the venue, the timing of everything, when these guys have access to the field. And they basically said, you're only getting 2 days in Ireland, deal with it. And so like the Steelers didn't have a choice in the matter as to when to go over. And now like within that time frame, they do have some flexibility on like when to schedule their flight. But I don't think there's a reason to think the Steelers are going to be at a significant disadvantage because of the way they're approaching the week, the way that it seemed like it happened last time, talking to guys like Cam Hayward and Ben Roethlisberger who were on that team.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up is, that pretty vocal about feeling like they didn't go about it the right way. But I guess with the NFL doing, like, how much is in their control about all of this really anyway?
Very little. Said, just like specifically, like they moved their practices up early in the week. So they'll be practicing in the morning here, which will be afternoon in Ireland. So trying to get ready for that 9 a.m. Eastern kickoff. But they can decide if they want to fly, like right after practice on Thursday, or wait until later in the evening on Thursday. So you're arriving, at 6 a.m. or at 8 a.m. or at 9 a.m., whatever. So yeah, that's what they have under their control. Not a whole lot. Now, there's other parts of it, like, the sleep part of it, the hydration part of it, the all that stuff is obviously always in the team's control, but I don't think it's much of a mystery anymore at this point.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know if Thursday night is when they'll be leaving, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, that is, it's a quick turnaround. I'm curious to see what the reaction is following, more so than anything else. But okay, anything else to be mentioned from the Ireland specific?
We got to talk about Ireland. No, it was cool to hear Mike talk about Ambassador Rooney, Dan Rooney, and the just the sort of way that they talk about him, trying to teach a new generation of Steelers players about him. I mean, it's been there are very few Steelers players who were around when Dan was there. Just he may have. I think it was before the draft. So I think just Cam and Boss, right?
Was it before TJ?
I think it was. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So really, it's just through stories and obviously walking those halls and learning. But it's all secondhand at this point. So yeah, that's not something that was necessarily on my mind. But you said we got to talk. You started to say we got to talk about. I was wondering where you were trying to go with that. If you thought
we got to talk about Anthony Richardson.
It's
the funniest thing that happened all day.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's funny is was it just yesterday on here? I mentioned I want to at some point talk about how I feel like Kevin O'Connell's offense, similarly to Shane Steichen and Indy, could provide similar problems for the defense that the Steelers play. A lot of cover 1, cover 3. Steichen has a lot of answers for those. We see that KOC is able to dial it up. Really doesn't matter who the quarterback is. You look at what Carson Wentz just did to Cincinnati. And I think that he poses some similar issues for defenses, but it's funny that, you talk about these two teams and dial it back to last year. I think we're seeing Anthony Richardson ends up being Joe Flacco. And it kind of sounds like that's what Mike Tomlin did not want to have happen in that football game.
Yeah. Pretty hilarious. Well, I mean, he starts out the conversation talking about Carson Wentz and saying how, he thinks these grizzled veteran quarterbacks are not a big deal in the short term when they're playing for teams. That, on a game in and game out basis, basically Mike Tomlin's thought process is here. You're just as well off with that guy as you are trying to develop a younger player as you're going along, like a JJ McCarthy, like an Anthony Richardson. And I think that's probably correct. I mean, just look at the bust rate on even first round quarterbacks. And what's if you give me an average NFL first round quarterback, or you give me Carson Wentz, Kirk Cousins, Joe Flacco level, old guy who's been there, done that, but probably isn't going to be great. Over the course of one season, I think the better average is probably with the old guy. Wouldn't you just because of the number of just total flame out quarterbacks out there?
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to sit down and then go through and look at it. But I mean, yeah, off the top of my head, I would think so. I mean, just in a short sample size, like you're saying, I think so. Now, if you're talking about having that same quarterback play throughout an entire season for your team, I think that you're talking about obviously Cincinnati's dealing with that with Jake Browning right now. We've seen that happen with Mason Rudolph in Pittsburgh. It's a little bit of a different scenario, but just I see where he's coming from for sure. I am curious to see how the results bear out.
So the way this gets to Anthony Richardson is, as these supporting this argument for old quarterbacks being better than the young guys that don't know any better. And I also add this from a defensive coach's perspective, it's a lot harder to confuse, frighten, or otherwise disrupt a guy who has already seen it all. Tomlin's looking at this oh man, I had all kinds of evil tricks dialed up to punish JJ McCarthy's youth and inexperience that now I don't get to deliver because Carson Wentz has already seen them all. But anyway, he says that last year he told his defense to keep Anthony Richardson in the game, that they did not want to hurt him, that they because they didn't want to see Joe Flacco, and they ended up knocking Anthony Richardson out of the game and losing to Joe Flacco. That is the one. It is unbelievable that happened, and that he said that, and it's still I've never heard anyone say that ever. Now, I know there's been times where coaches have thought it, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody say it. But alone to say we said to keep him up, and then we got beat by the backup, just like we were worried about. Man,
do you think the odds of Anthony Richardson's next team being the Pittsburgh Steelers went down at all after that got out?
The odds of Anthony Richardson's next team being the Pittsburgh Steelers involved Anthony Richardson hitting the Powerball and buying the Steelers for himself so that he could play quarterback for them. That's about what needed to happen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, between the tapping out of the game and then Tomlin saying this about him, I'd say,
and just sort of being the least accurate quarterback in the last 20 years of the NFL. There's that also. And turnovers, which we're going to get back to here real soon, by the way. Just an absolute turnover machine. The Steelers were never going to. But so I guess this is a like triple backhanded insult at Anthony Richardson. By comparison, J.J. McCarthy, because if you're comparing any situation to one that includes Anthony Richardson as a quarterback, that's an insult. Like, if you're talking about anybody, it's just like when we were facing Anthony Richardson. That in itself is a put down. And also his own defense for being like, you dummies, I told you not to hurt the bad one. Now they put the good one in.
I do remember watching that game last year and being like, oh, they're going to lose. They're going to lose to Flacco here. And to be honest, I think it has a lot to do with Shane Steichen. And on the other side of that, I think it's why I view Minnesota so highly with Kevin O'Connell. But, we can continue talking about that throughout the week. Did anything else come out of Mike Tomlin today before we get into what you are fired up about or feisty? I'm sorry about.
Fired up is fine too. No, I think that's kind of the big points that I feel like we need to talk about.
Okay, so Warren Sharp put this out, and there's been some follow-ups as well to include within this. But Steelers have 417 yards fewer than their opponents this year, yet they're 2-1. How did we get here? 32 points off of turnovers, which is first. They've allowed 0 points from their own turnovers, which is number one. Plus 32 points off of turnover margin, that is number one. Plus 31.9 EPA off of turnovers. He put out a video, Alan, and the thumbnail is a picture of Aaron Rodgers. It has one of those dolls next to him, and it says Voodoo Magic. You do not like that the word here was voodoo in regards to the Steelers having done this or are currently doing this because it's happening yet again. This isn't an anomaly at this point.
Yeah, first of all, let me start by saying I really like Warren Sharp, and I think he does a really good job. But I feel like this is a common blind spot of analytically driven observers of sports, is that you latch on to these suppositions that are usually true, but then you can't let them go when the exception proves itself, right? Do turnovers usually involve a bit of luck? Absolutely. I think most interceptions are thrown, not caught. There's exceptions. Maybe you bait a quarterback with a coverage, or a DB just makes an outstanding physical individual play. But I think most of the time, the quarterback makes a mistake, and then that's how you get an interception. And that your ability to create turnovers is at some level incumbent on the other team making an error. Obviously, a fumble is wholly incumbent on the other team making some kind of error, and recovering a fumble is basically a coin flip. There's no skill whatsoever to recovering your fumbles. The Steelers went 4 for 4 with 4 fumbles. That is voodoo and luck, okay? But when you look at the big picture about the Pittsburgh Steelers and their ability to continually dominate the turnover margin and the way they play in order to maximize their dominance of the turnover margin, stop calling it voodoo. It's not mystical. It's not magic. It's Mike Tomlin. This is what he does. This is the intent of their entire defense, is the yards don't matter, get the ball. That is what they are trying to do. And so, like, this entire idea that it's just luck is nonsense and is so easily disproved by their ability to do it year after year after year after year. If you're talking about, like, the Steelers voodoo strikes again, look, man, if voodoo worked all the time, we wouldn't call it voodoo, we'd call it science. That's not voodoo. Something is able to be provenly repeated, that's a fact. That's not voodoo. The Steelers are good at this. There's no mysticism here, and it really bothers me when people that are generally pretty smart about sports, they just get so caught up in the, usually, yeah, but, like, this is very clearly a team that is proven to be the exception to that rule, and you should not judge the Pittsburgh Steelers based on their yardage total and expect them to just revert to the mean by the end of the season, or you're just going to continually be disappointed.
Do you have like I was trying to think of a good analogy for this. Like I was thinking like maybe like obviously Tom Brady is a 6th round pick. It'd be like people saying he's not good just because of where he was a 6th round pick his entire career. Like because it happened year after year after year after year where he obviously outplayed that draft status, but it'd be like going back and saying, yeah, but think about it. He was a 6th round pick for a reason, despite what he
It's very similar to the conversation over the last few years between TJ Watt and Myles Garrett about, look, on the whole, in general, sacks are noisy and pressures are less noisy, and the conversion rate between sacks and pressures is somewhat random. But then you have a few players who have proven to repeatedly be able to turn a lot more of their pressures into sacks than other players. So stop comparing them to other players with pressures. It's not an apples to apples comparison at that point. You know he's more likely, and if you go look, that all these websites try to predict sack totals. Seth Walter from ESPN does this. I think PFF does this. Every single year they underrate TJ Watt. Why? Because their methodology is wrong. Because they're refusing to acknowledge that thing that looks random in most cases is in this case actually not random. And it's the same thing here with the Steelers.
So to put it simple, and I'm following most of what you're saying here, but do you think it's because of them just refusing to acknowledge that an outlier exists?
Yeah.
Okay.
That outliers can not only exist, everyone I think acknowledges that outliers exist, but that there are persistent outliers that will never revert to the mean. Everyone knows outliers happen. Like, that's just the way it works. If somebody with a career 180 batting average can go up there and hit 3 home runs in a game, and you just say, well, I don't think that changes my impact, my belief about that player. I just assume that it's going to be another 3 seasons before he does that again, and that outlier will remain an outlier. But when you have persistent outliers, it should change your thinking about something. And that is the entrenchment that says, no, that outlier, it's still an outlier. Like, but it's not. And that's the part that upsets me. And I don't even necessarily think that Seth isn't doing that, but just the way it's being talked about bothers me. It's not voodoo. Like, it just isn't. And if you want any more proof of that, Andrew Filipponi, and we've made a big swing here from data science to pony, and those two things are not related.
I mean, Pony himself also a pretty big switch up with the positive tweet about Mike Tomlin. So like this is
tweeted about Mike Tomlin's record in 1-score games. Obviously, a team's ability to outperform its yardage and its winning percentage in 1-score games are going to be very closely correlated, right? I mean, that's basically what you're doing there. 98, 61, and 2 in 1-score games, best winning percentage in the NFL, which I think most people knew. How about this one, though? 24 and 11 in 1-score games since Ben Roethlisberger retired. With Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and now Aaron Rodgers at 41 years old, Mike Tomlin is 24 and 11 in 1-score games. If that is not all the proof you need that this is not voodoo magic, I don't know what else I can give you. Because that is an absurd percentage for what has been a not very good football team.
Well, yeah, 1-score games is another thing that people look at as like an anomaly. If you're like Minnesota, right? A few years ago, were super good in 1-score games, got bounced in the first round of the playoffs that year, and they weren't good the following season. Like people kind of expected that was going to happen because people are like, some of those are going to turn into losses the following season. But to your point with the Steelers, they have been
this is why
the outlier time and time again.
Their Vegas win total, 5 or 6 years in a row? I think 5 years in a row. They've gone over their Vegas win total. This is it. Because if you want to look at things like a computer, you say, hey, the Steelers are probably not going to win. I don't know what percentage that is off the top of my head. A lot. We'll do math.
Are you talking about the without Ben or
70, almost 7? They're not going to continue to win almost 70% of their one-score games with bad quarterback play. Like we should just, and so that's how you assume that the Steelers are going to be worse than they are, and then they continue to prove it wrong. And look, I get after this because it's the Steelers, and I have a lot of knowledge about the Steelers, and I have the goods to prove this stuff wrong when it's about the Steelers. When people start talking about the turnovers, when people start talking about Tomlin's record with in one-score games, when people start talking about Watt and his statistical anomaly ability to convert pressures into sacks. But Smitty, if there was a me for every team, well, the world would be a better place. But there would be people for every team that would be able to point those things out about those teams. Now, maybe not to the same level because the Steelers have a unicorn-like amount of consistency over time that lets us have these big data points that tell us a lot about them and how they operate. But like, this is why I am generally an analytically minded person. I covered baseball and hockey during those sports analytics revolutions. And I generally poo-poo the things that are called analytics in football because they just don't hold up to the same level that we have come to expect in other places that caused major shifts in thinking of those sports. We should not think that about a lot of what's going on in the football analytics sphere.
Real quick, I've been waiting to get this out there since you said the world would be a better place. Subscribe to Browns Now Plus with Alan Sanders. Also, it's spelled Allen. But also just going back to your point too, where it's like the intention behind it. You mentioned TJ Watt for the sack stuff, right? Dude also has 5 more forced fumbles than anybody else since 2016. Like, it just seems like even the personnel very intentional with who they bring in. Like, it's a turnover culture that is being built on that side.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they do not, I don't want to say they don't care. The ball is more important than the grass. It is a fundamental belief of their defense. You can tell by the way they play. Like, it should be obvious.
Yeah. Okay, so trying to figure out how to put a bow on that conversation. In closing on that, I guess, what does this say about them? Like, obviously, we feel like this is going to continue, assuming that they continue to attack this the same way. But I don't know. Is there some type? Does it cap their ability? Do you feel like is this why, like we call Mike Tomlin a floor raiser, but is the ceiling capped on that in your mind, or no? That's just because of the
you're not gonna be an elite team unless you're like, you can't be an elite team and be upside down in yardage. Like, you're not going to be. But you can be a good team and be upside down in yardage, and that shouldn't surprise anyone. Like, you understand? So, like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Like, if the Steelers were 3-0 right now, and maybe very little had changed about those first 3 games, other than whatever, Calvin Austin catches the touchdown, Caleb Johnson fields a punt, or fields a kickoff, and now all of a sudden the Steelers are 3-0, and some people out there are talking about the Steelers as a Super Bowl contender. This would be a very good way to say, slow down. That's probably not going to happen. But, like, that's not the narrative that's out there about this team. I think people are generally, I mean, at least Steelers fans are generally a bit overly negative about the way the team stands right now, which is in first place, Smitty. We didn't mention that. Baltimore losing on Monday Night Football. Steelers and Bengals tied for first place. Not the worst place to be after 3 weeks.
No, I mean, it's just so, like, it's so weird watching Baltimore. They just make everything look so easy, and then they just, like, have this desire to shoot themselves in the foot. Like, it's so wild to watch. Like, top to bottom, what a great roster, but then they just do this silly stuff. Like, they're moving the ball with ease, getting to the red zone, and they have Derrick Henry throw a pass. Like, what are we doing? Like, this isn't what you're talking about when you talk about getting creative on offense. And I love Todd Monken, by the way, in a very exciting Monday Night Football game. But yeah, I don't know how you'd feel any better if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan watching that defense. I mean, they've been worse than the Steelers, not only because of the yards allowed, but also they've given up the most points, or tied for the most points in the NFL as well through 3 games. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how Steelers fans should watch that game and necessarily feel worse about their positioning. Jake Browning, a quarterback for the Bengals, not take anything away from him, but they just got walloped by the Vikings, which, I guess I shouldn't throw stones from a glass house with that team still on tap this coming week. The Browns did beat the Packers. That was a thing that happened, but they play that game 9 more times, and I'm picking Green Bay to win every single time.
Yeah, it was a big survivor pool death trap there.
Real quick to bring up too, I guess it's coming from the desk of Alan Saunders into the group chat here. I just noticed a little bit ago, Nate Herbig in for a tryout today with the Steelers. That's interesting. Did he? So I mean, he announced his retirement, correct?
Yeah, he got cut, right, and then he announced his retirement, I think. But I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, like, if you're getting the player that was originally here, I know that we're removed from that. Some injuries have taken place and everything like that. They could do a heck of a lot worse than this as a replacement for like a Max Sharping. So, yeah, we'll see if it's anything there, but not bad for veteran offensive lineman addition on the interior. And I think the versatility is nice to have as well. Obviously, can play center or guard. So hopefully he's healthy, and if he could be a piece, he could be a piece. But all right, good stuff. We'll continue the conversation throughout the rest of the week on here, Alan. But until tomorrow, tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now sites account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so I can get paid. Sign up for SN Plus. Subscribers only live stream coming up on Monday at 6 p.m. Me, you, DB, maybe some others will join us. We'll see. And of course, anyone could like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here on the YouTube channel as we continue to try to grow this channel to a larger and larger audience. And for some reason, I am having a hard time finding the number today.
It went back down.
It's the same.
It was, yeah. Well, it was
the same number as it was yesterday.
It was up 2 and now it's back down. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Who's unsubscribing? It's like people heard us talking in a positive light about Mike Tomlin before they actually listened to the episode. They decided to unsubscribe.
There you go.
I don't know.
Someone was very upset that I was recording the podcast while driving yesterday.
I did see that.
As if
I didn't know if
not like a recurring tenet of the program. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, how did you arrive here 3 years into this? Be like, what?
Mm-hmm. I didn't know if that was a like them thinking it's dangerous thing, or it was more so about like the quality at times, depending on the area.
I am sympathetic to the quality concerns. I've actually been looking into trying to find a way to get some better quality recording when in the vehicle. So we're working on that.
Well, you know what's tough for me is like I don't always notice like until I see the comments and I see what people say, and then like I'll go back and look at it and see, because like at times I don't lose you or anything like that. You sound fine to me, and then I'll go back and it'll be like super choppy on the recording.
Yeah. So from I'm trying to make 2 different upgrades. One from an audio standpoint. I just usually use an AirPod, which isn't the best. Like the sound quality is not great. So looking at a better quality microphone setup, and then maybe something there's something we can do in StreamYard that I think can help with that. So we'll see.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we already threw every 34 out there yesterday, so no use in doing that. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure it's a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Just search through his Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok. Then you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.